Um, ooh, that is hot. This new mic is a little. Ooh, did that not work? Is that good? Oh, there you go. I turned the decibel thing down another one. Yeah, so you might have gotten from my lead-in question there, and many of you might be able to answer the question or the idea that I alluded to, the most painful thing that I've been through. If you've been around for, I guess it's been 8 years now. So 8 years ago, it's a story for a whole nother time. You get a brief synopsis of it. 8 years ago, I was at a kindergartner's birthday party, jumping on a trampoline, ruptured both of my patella tendons. My kneecaps went into my thighs. I was not able to even move my legs for 9 weeks. I was in a wheelchair for 20-some weeks. Crazy, crazy time, right? And, North Coast Gymnastics says, you know what the number one reason we call aid cars are? They're like middle-aged men at birthday parties. And so, and that's like a big facility, a lot of kids jumping around. But that, my friends, was not the most painful physical injury that I had ever been through. In 2000, I think Heather and I settled, I think it was like 2008, 2009, I was on a missions trip in Mexico. I was playing soccer on the beach with a group of kids, and I went to go kick the ball, and I buried my toe in the sand. I kicked the ball, and I snapped that little ligament on the top of my big toe that just like made my toe go like floppy, right? And so, but because it was just like my big toe, you would think, and at that moment, that wasn't the pain. That was like, I can't, you lose your balance a little bit when you can't put your toes are for that, And so at that point, I was fine. I got home. I went and saw a specialist. I went and saw the Seattle Sounders, the soccer team's surgeon, like personal doctor or whatever. I don't even know how I got hooked up with him, but and I went down to Seattle, and I had surgery down in Seattle to reattach that little ligament that just runs on. You can see it when you put your toe up. You can see that ligament, to reconnect that ligament to my toe. And for whatever reason, Heather was like, yeah, you know what? That was funny because I was pregnant. We had Colby, who was like 4, Avery, who was like 1, and Micah was like on the way. I don't know. We had a couple kids, a baby coming on the way, and so I went, and it was down in Seattle. My parents lived in Edmonds at the time, and so I stayed at my parents' house after the surgery. We came back to her house because I needed my mom to take care of me. But we all need our moms at some point. Mom, if you're watching, thank you for taking care of me. But I remember because I got back to my parents' house, it was like 3 hours or so after that surgery, and I thought because it was my big toe that I would just combat it with Tylenol and ibuprofen. And I should have known when I walked into that surgical room for a toe. I mean, that room was giant, and there was machines everywhere, and I was like, are you literally taking my leg, it seemed like? But no, they were just repairing my toe. But I decided Tylenol and ibuprofen would curb that pain. And so after I got back, instead of taking my first dose of pain meds to deal with the surgery, I just took some Tylenol and some ibuprofen. And I remember that pain. And I will forever remember that pain. Because as it started to set in, and I realized that I had made a big mistake, I took my first dose of pain meds, and then I started counting the minutes. Like I'm sweating right now, even remembering, thinking about that, because I remember I counted the minutes, and it was like Heather is a nurse, and she was like, yeah, it's usually around like 25 minutes it takes for it to kick in, right? And so, but it was between minute 31 and minute 32 that pain had finally just started to take the edge off of my pain, and I realized in that moment that I wasn't going to die, because I really thought I wasn't going to die. Death by toe was not going to happen. And I was going to be all right. But, so for my most horrific accident, the double leg debacle where my feet were sideways, I couldn't move, like all that stuff. Like for that moment, that most horrific accident, the pain actually physically was to me was far less. Because I had learned a lesson. And that little tiny ligament on my toe had taught me a lesson that I wasn't going to revisit that pain. I didn't want to revisit that pain. So I The doctor and my stay-at-home nurse said, we got to stay on top. We got to watch it, but we got to stay on top of that so you don't, because that was a major, major surgery. But I had learned that lesson, and so for that horrific accident, because of that small little lesson I had learned, it shaped me on how I addressed that 2017 accident and the trampoline and how I would approach that long recovery that I had there. Now, mind you, 24 weeks in a wheelchair, 8 or 9 weeks of immobilization of my legs, riding that short bus everywhere, right? Whatcom County has an amazing setup where you pay $1 and that short bus comes to your house, picks you up, and takes you wherever you need to go. And so I did that for I think the full 9 weeks that I couldn't move my legs. That, even though the pain was separate, that accident taught me more in life than many, many, many other things, right? It literally changed my entire view on life and how I approached life. It changed how I viewed people in wheelchairs, because I was in a wheelchair and I was viewed similar to. So it changed how I viewed people in wheelchairs. I know it sounds silly, but it was very real. But the biggest thing that I saw in my life that was so different is I realized how horrible I was at receiving help. Always, obviously in the position I'm in and even the profession my wife's in, we are all about help. Helping people and gathering people together and building community and structure and strength around each other and helping professions, right? But I realized, being on that other side of need, being on the side of receiving and needing others to help me, I realized how horrible I was at that. I learned lessons about shouldering, that we all shoulder the pain together, that we all grow with each other. And it was a huge lesson in development in my life and how I viewed kind of my approach to life in general. And so now, I view life completely differently. Now, to shift gears a little bit, you know that this summer, if you're around it all this summer, I got to go on sabbatical. And I've shared, if you didn't hear, sorry you're going to hear about it secondhand like this, but 3 days into my sabbatical, my dad unexpectedly passed. Right? And so a whole different kind of pain. I had 10 weeks on sabbatical to process that, and then now it's been another 5 or 6 weeks since then, and 6 or 7 weeks, 7 or 8 weeks, we'll say that instead. And so, but I want to tell you this, that I don't even have a lot of clarity on that yet. That I'm not sure the why and the purpose behind it. It's a different kind of pain that I hadn't ever really walked through. I had a wave of it kind of resurface this week as college basketball started up and about to start coaching basketball again. It's basketball season, and this is the time of the year that I would always, daily conversations with my dad. How's Gonzaga doing? How's Duke doing? How's Avery doing in basketball? Are you coaching again? What offense are you running? What defense are you running? And so I had that moment as I was returning home this week from an open gym, and I was like, man, this is when I'd call Dad. And I'm working through that, and I'm still, I tell you this because I'm still trying to find the reason, the purpose, what can I learn from it? And so today, we continue our series that I introduced last week of Reframed, Finding Your Reason. And we're going to build on the idea of reframing everything based on, we talked about last week, reframing everything based on the truth that is Christ in our lives, the truth of what he did for us and all that, the truth of what's written in Scripture. But today, we're going to apply that truth to the nitty and gritty of our life, the pain, the hard situations, how we can view and approach those in our life, those moments that can be tough, that can be hard, those that can be exhausting. incredibly intentional. It seemed like it's the longest journey that I've been on. Have you ever been in a moment or are in a moment like that, right? We've all had those moments in those areas of our lives. I read a quote this week. This is a quote. This isn't from Scripture, so this is just a quote I read on social media. Might have been one of you that posted it. I don't know where I give the credit to, but once you get comfortable in life, you stop growing. Once you get comfortable in life, you start growing. You can't want comfort and greatness at the same time. And that kind of hit me. I read over that a few times. I clipped it out. I printed it out and set it on my desk so I'd read it over and over. You will not form character and strength, perseverance, and a life of ease. You will not form character, build strength, and have perseverance in a life of ease. The life of ease that what seems like, if you're like me, maybe you can relate to this or not, the life of ease that we so desperately want. As a parent of 5, I desperately want a life of ease. Like I want peace, I want some of that, right? Because here's the deal. There are going to be days, if you're not in it, it'll happen soon. If you're just out of it, prepare yourself. Maybe that's an opportunity, what you learned in that. But there are going to be days, moments, experiences in life where it seems unbearable. When a trampoline or life in general knocks you down so hard that you feel like it's impossible to get back up. Where the doubt and the noise of the lies and everything around you drowns everything out that you've been holding on to. That in those moments where we think we might give up, because what if, and not even what if, because here's the deal, in those moments, and it isn't a what if, it's I'm so confident in, what if it is the storm that we walk through, every storm that shapes us and breaks us open to a purpose in rebuilding in truth. That the scars and the tears and the sleepless nights and the stress and the worry, that in all of those things, honestly can hold in and be proof that you are bigger than that. That your God can give you purpose and meaning in all of that. That every single struggle you've ever had in your life was actually an opportunity to mold, indirectly or directly, mold you into the person that you are today and that you're meant to be for tomorrow. Some of what I was wrestling with this week. 2 Corinthians 1:3-4 says, "Blessed be the God and Father of the Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all of our affliction." Jeremiah 29:11, "For I know the plans I have for you." You probably heard this one. One of the most misquoted scriptures. But anyways, Jeremiah 29:11, because it comes following hardship. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you hope in a future." Psalm 138:8, "The Lord will fulfill his purpose for me. Your steadfast love endures forever." Romans 8:28, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." Philippians 2:13, "For it is God who works in you and to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purposes in your life." Those verses all reference and are called upon in times of this trouble. And so I ask you the question this morning is, how many of you just love hardship and pain? Just me and Tim in the back, right? I know oftentimes I just bring it on myself, right? But I actually think it's not that we don't like hardship, pain, and suffering and trials. It's that we don't like hardship, pain, suffering, and trials that is purposeless. that has no purpose and meaning in our lives. Right? No meaning. Knowing what I know now and how much I grew from that poor choice I made to try to turn a flip at a kindergartner's birthday party, knowing what I know now, I wouldn't orchestrate not going through that. Because the lesson I learned in that time and period in my life in 2017 is a lesson that still today in 2025 has deep meaning and impact in personal development in my life today. And I know it's weird to say that, but if you think back, and you probably already have something either you're struggling with right now or you've struggled with in the past, if you think back, some of the biggest struggles and pain and hardship in your life are probably, unless you're lying to yourself, some of the biggest lessons you've learned in life. Some of the biggest opportunity to grow that you've ever had in your life, whether you've taken advantage of it or not. There was opportunity to grow. Romans 8:18, not 28, says, consider that our present suffering. I love that in that verse in Corinthians, it actually says, he comforts us in all of our afflictions. He doesn't say, for those of you that have afflictions. He says that you're going to have afflictions. You're going to have pain. That's just part of the deal. Part of living here on the earth. We'll get into that a little bit, but here it is. Romans 8:18 says, consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. That your present sufferings don't even compare to the glory that will be revealed. Whew. If we put that lens on our suffering, on our pain, and the hardship that we have in life, man, at least we're faced with that opportunity. Is that something that we want to work through? That God may be doing something in you before he does something through you. Not that he orchestrates the pain. Maybe he's allowed it. But what I'm confident that no matter what the origin is, whether it's just my dumb, poor choice, someone else's poor choice, God's allowance, or maybe even God orchestrated, or just the often excuse we live in a broken world. Truth, hard to swallow, truth though. But what I'm confident of is that God's capacity, his ability, his willingness, God's presence is to bring in all of life situations, is to bring an outcome of his glory. Romans 8:28, we already read it. And now that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. And what I don't want you to hear in this moment is, suck it up, God's going to use it for good. Because if you're like me, if you were to say that to me at certain times and when I was facing certain things in my life, like I'd want to fight you. Like I'd want to throat punch you or something, like I'm not there yet, right? I'm living in the middle of it. I mean, the wounding of my dad's passing isn't something I'm going to fight you over. But I'm not there yet. I want to be there. And eventually I'm confident I will. So I don't want you to hear, just suck it up, God's going to make it good. Right? We have to work through it. But what I am confident of is that the outcome is ultimately his glory. That no matter what, without a doubt, there can be or is a purpose in whatever it is that you are facing in life. Whether without a doubt you caused it, you caused the circumstances, which then you're like, well, God doesn't want to use me, right? Or the unfortunate dumb luck of XYZ happening. But but there can be purpose and meaning in it. And it can be when we allow God move. Those verses, all those verses that I spouted off a second ago, did you catch what was kind of intertwined and kind of written in those verses? It was future, steadfastness, endurance, work. Right? He works. Fulfillment. Right? There's this element of this idea of a process. And I feel our lack of enjoyment, patience, desire for, causes this reaction for most of us to try to fixate on the moment or whatever it is that we're facing in our lives. We try to fixate on the trials and the trouble and the process. That in our moment of pain, we try to do whatever we can to get out of it. Everything in my power, I'm going to just direct it directly at trying to get out of that situation. Eliminate that situation in life. And we become fixated and consumed by elimination instead of illumination. Does that make sense to you? There's elimination where I just want to get rid of it. I want to brush it under the rug. I want to revert all of my power and attention to it until it goes away. Or there's this illumination of God's glory. And it's a realization as well as a revelation, realization for who God is, who he can be. And it's a revelation in the process of what is produced. It's a balance between the Christian word sanctification, which is the process of being sanctified. It is the process of learning and growing and becoming. It's a process between sanctification and trust. Trust, which then produces our faith and what God will do. I heard it put this week in my readings that trust is how we view God. So we trust him in these areas in our lives, or just we trust him in general. We trust him in his sovereignty and power and authority. And faith is the action that is produced out of that trust, which for me was kind of backwards in thinking. But faith is the actions that we then take according to our trust. Faith is staying in for the process. Faith is not doing everything in your power to get out of pain and out of the circumstance. The everyday endurance of trusting God. And faith is yet still realizing that God is sovereign. He is with you. And he very well could be up to something, at the very least, willing to produce something we have probably all heard. Probably what God directs for us. You probably heard this verse before. James 1, 2-4, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whatever you face trials of any kind, because you are, consider it joy, brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials. So consider the trials that you're in pure joy, because you know that there's a testing of the faith which produces perseverance. Perseverance is this idea of getting through something, persevering through something. And that's probably, if you're like me, that's probably where you've left that verse. I've taught that verse isolated and by itself quite often. Well, consider it pure joy, the trials that you have faced. Now let's talk about how you can, that's kind of what we're doing right now. Let's talk about how those trials can be pure joy, growth and understanding, right? But it's the next verse that kind of rocked me this week. It finishes out the verse with, let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete and not lacking anything. Let perseverance, let it be worked out so that you may grow in maturity, you may grow in understanding, you may grow in your completeness, not lacking anything. That there can always be purpose. And last week we talked about this at the 20,000 foot level, and this idea of that if we see and allow for everything to flow through how God would desire for us to see and reframe the way we look at our life in general, but it applies for this as well. That if we relinquish control, which I think is a big piece of it, and we let perseverance finish its work, there's opportunity to grow in maturity and understanding of who Christ, who God is in our lives. I believe, like I already stated to you at the very beginning of this, I believe one of the reasons why hardship of life produces so much growth and development, you know what I believe it is? I believe it's because we don't have, at least at the beginning, we don't control it, right? We don't, well, I was going to say it, but we don't go looking for trouble. Sometimes I go looking for trouble. Heather's not here, so I'm not going to get in trouble. But we don't seek out hardship and trials and tribulation in our life. Like we don't, unless, I mean, maybe that's your thing, but we don't necessarily seek that out. It comes upon us, whether a trampoline or a diagnosis or a broken relationship. Like we're not seeking that out. Sure, some of our actions, like being overweight and middle-aged and jumping on trampolines, produces something happening, right? It produces an outcome that people are like, I saw that coming, right? But and whatever it is that you're facing, like, you know, there sometimes is that procedure, but we don't go seeking that out. And because we don't go seeking that out, it comes upon us. And in the midst of that, in that very moment, we don't have control. Now, we do our best in the coming time to then start grabbing and grasping at control and trying to eliminate the situation and trying to separate ourselves from it, and sometimes probably even missing out on what the lesson might be or the moment that we're in. Again, not that it's God orchestrated, maybe allowed, but more so His willingness to just be there with us. But we can get fixated on getting through that fire and that storm and not get something from it. That the circumstances in our lives that we are so desperately trying to change are often the circumstances that God wants very well to use to bring change in our life. Like that's actually what He's going to use to bring about that change in your life. And church, it isn't just weathering the storm longer or that makes us stronger. That's just another, I'm not saying here, well, sit in your wallowing for a long time until you get a clear picture. No. That's just another version of controlling. It's actually the idea of letting Christ be involved with that and letting Him lead you in actually going to Him instead of eliminating and separating and distancing. My friend Matt, he's watching online today. My friend Matt sent me a podcast this week to listen to. I still have to send you one. But this podcast I listened to took over my thoughts for a few days until I kind of submitted it back to God and said, what do you want to do with this? This has been it's been constantly in my mind. And so I gave it over, and fittingly, God, what do you want to do with this? I've wrestled with this now. I want to give it back to you. I consent it to you. I consent that I want you to do something with it. And that's what this kind of podcast was about. Consent is this idea of permission for something to happen or an agreement to do something. It's in a sense saying, I've tried to control this now for a long time, And now I consent for you to do now what it is that you want to do in it. That might be, if you really think about it, this ongoing conversation that you might be having with God. And here's the truth. And I think it doesn't take much to admit this. The truth is, and even the Bible's super clear on it, who in this room has been able to take full control of your life? Like you just have it all figured out. You have it all under control. Okay, just me? Sweet. No, not me. I shouldn't have had my lightning. No. Right? We don't. As hard as we want to control our lives, we can't. I've tried. For years, I've tried. But we can give control to so many things in our lives. We do. We give it away because we can't grasp it ourselves. And we give it away only because we aren't able to control it ourselves. And none of us, are able to live the life that we should, that we feel we're awarded to live, that we feel we deserve, that we feel we need or desire. None of us can even achieve it if we wanted to. That's kind of the question I asked, right? But even if we were to achieve it, that bar would just move again. And we would try to get to that next level, right? And so we give that control away daily to things in our lives. And so I ask you, why not consent? Why not consent to the author and the perfecter of life? The one who is capable, and the one who, if we think back, like I asked you at the beginning of this, like what are the areas of your life that you've grown the most? Like he's been faithful. And we get the greatest example of this with Jesus. He's in the garden, and he gives us the greatest example of this consent. In the garden, and he's talked about it over and over. He's told all the disciples. Peter's messed it up a couple times already, and they're all there, and Peter's fallen asleep, I think, at that point, and then woken up. He's there, and he's talked about it a lot. And he's about to face what he's going to face, and he says to God, not my will, but your will. Take this cup if you can, but not my will. What I want more than to eliminate the situation I am is I want to consent to your will. It's that idea of I've done everything I can do. It is reaching the point of our own humanity and saying, unless God figures this out, I can't. It is getting to the end of yourself and then consenting and finally allowing God to move in. And then slowly or immediately brings purpose, and it brings meaning. It brings that maturity. Sure, it strengthens us, but it strengthens us in him more. And so I want to close with this. What in your life right now are you facing? What are you so desperately trying to get through? What are you so desperately trying to get a hold of? What is your struggle right now? What is it? Can I pray for you? For his sovereignty, for his authority, for his power in that. And I don't know what it is. I want to invite the band to come forward. Jesus, we come before you this morning. Broken, fallen, exhausted, tired, joyful, excited, energized. We come just in truth of who we are. Lord, I thank you that you love us right where we're at. But like I've often said, Lord, I love that you are willing to love me right here, but I love that you love me so much that you want so much more for me. And so, Lord, I pray right now for your sovereignty and you can agree with me, your sovereignty in my life. Your power, your authority, your move, your work, your perseverance, your fulfillment, your endurance to work. And two, I consent. I consent to those things in my life. God, not my will, but your will. Again, only if you agree with it. God, not my will, but your will. May I see you more clearly. And in that, know you more deeply. Trust you more, which then produces the actions of faith. And because of that, live my life in the truth of that revelation, Lord. Your name. Amen. Amen. Let's sing loud again in agreement and truth of who he is in our lives.